Well, I'd like to welcome everyone this morning to our Harnett County Board of Commissioners work session. It is the appointed time for us to begin, so I'll call the meeting to order, and I'll ask Mr. Witherspoon if he will do our Pledge of Allegiance and invocation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you today, Lord, thanking you for this day and for all the many blessings you give us each day and continually give us. Lord, we ask your guidance during this meeting today. May everything that we do be pleasing in your sight and in accordance to your will. May we remove ourselves and look to you, the ultimate leader, for guidance. Be with our first responders, be with our law enforcement, and Lord, be with our military as they preserve our freedom. These things we ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Commissioner Witherspoon. Before we move to the next item on the agenda, I would just like to take a moment of personal privilege and thank Commissioner Witherspoon for leading in my absence as I've been out of town the last couple of weeks, and to all the commissioners for carrying on. Also to Mr. Price, Mr. Haney, and the staff for filling in for Mr. Wood when he was out for a little while. It's good to have you back, Mr. Wood. Yeah, and I as well. So anyway, thank you for allowing me that moment. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is a discussion of Harnett County's legal department request for approval of bylaws of Administrative Appeals Board for the school bus Star Farm violations. Mr. Appel.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
So, obviously, before I've come to you regarding the bylaws for the appeals board, which will hear all appeals for the stop arm violations, which is, I believe the go-live date will be September 1st, so appeals will probably start sometime in October. But come back to you because last time we discussed the makeup of the board and what it should be. As I mentioned, as I've had my weekly discussions with Bus Patrol, there is a potential that the volume of the appeals could result in all-day hearings. Again, going based on their numbers, if their prediction of 1,000 tickets a month at a 1 to 3% appeals rate, which again at the beginning it's probably going to be at the higher rate, so 30 appeals or so. If you're going on their numbers. So you factor in 15, 30 minutes per appeal, that is an all-day process. And you want to hear all of them in that one day because you don't want to continue the next day because you don't want to balloon. So two options, I think, with the membership. So as of right now, the way the bylaws were previously presented was one Harnett County employee, one school employee, and one citizen. Another option, because of the amount of time it's going to take, and we're going to need to do this during the day from 9 to 5 instead of at night like our other boards, is to do 2 county employees and a school board employee, or vice versa, 2 school board employees and 1 county employee. That's another option just due to the time commitment that's involved in this. I think by doing it during the day, you're going to have a more limited candidate pool because you're probably not going to be able to get anyone who actually has a full-time job, like a board of adjustment where they can work it in to their normal schedule. But if we go with the citizen, I know one request was to look at what kind of qualifications you'd want for this individual. Obviously, there's no go-by in the state for this type of board, so I didn't have anything to reference on this. I was looking at Board of Adjustment to get an idea of ours and other counties and some other similar boards, our airport committee. So our Board of Adjustment, there is no requirement for a Board of Adjustment other than you just have to be a Harnett County resident. And obviously, I think it's based on districts. Airport committee does have some qualifications, which is obvious. At the airport, a pilot, business man, Campbell rep, commissioners, and so on. So those are kind of 2 different examples of where it's just basic qualifications and some with some background knowledge. So we can put some minimum qualifications, but again, knowing that we have a limited pool, we probably want to keep it as broad as we can. So, at a minimum, 18 years or older, Harnett County resident, and then no active law enforcement or probably anyone that works for a law enforcement agency. You probably want those as a minimum qualifications to maintain, especially for the law enforcement, to keep that separation. So, now, you could throw in some other qualifications, just some other things I could think of. You can have in there, maybe not a requirement, but a preference for someone with knowledge of traffic citations or rules or general legal procedures, or someone with a general experience in administrative hearings or dispute resolutions. Again, if you put those in there, it's not a requirement, it's just a suggestion, and the reason to not put if you put that kind of thing in there, you don't want to put a requirement because, again, I don't know what kind of candidate pool we're going to get. So, as for criminal background, again, our other board adjustment don't have requirement that you not have a criminal background, but you could put in there, again, no felony convictions or no criminal traffic convictions within 3 to 5 years, something like that. So those are just kind of the ideas I came up with. But other than that, I don't want to put too many limitations on this if we're going to go with a citizen. So, welcome to hear any feedback from the board or any questions or anything else. Again, that's if we decide to go with the citizen and not all employees. Welcome to hear, any suggestions.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Any suggestions, comments, further discussion, any of the board members?
And before, sorry, I want to also mention, because the other question is a stipend if we go with the citizen. So three of our boards receive stipends. So the Board of Health, the chair gets $30, members get $25. Social Services Board chair gets $50, members get $40, and the Board of Adjustment, our chair gets $110, and members get $100. So if we're looking at, again, using a citizen, probably want to go with the Board of Adjustment type numbers, and they're committing about 3 to 4 hours every month. So I would think, if this is an all-day endeavor, you're probably looking at $200 or so for each event. So I just want to throw that out there as well if you're leaning towards going with a citizen on this board.
Chris, you might want to take into consideration anybody who applies for a position is not in any kind of lawsuit or litigation with the county.
Any other thoughts, Ms. McCoy?
I'd like to say, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm glad you went back and reviewed it and so forth. I think that all that you have there, qualifications and all that stuff, it's the right thing to do.
And so do you like the qualifications, say a preference for these types of backgrounds, but not a requirement?
Yes. Yes, especially if they're not haven't been involved in any tickets or anything like that. I just speak plain, just like it is. I think it's okay. I think it's great. That's when I applaud you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Nick, would you have something?
I'll just say that the way that you presented it sounded good. It seems like you're taking everything into consideration and making it streamlined basically as we can. I would definitely agree on not having someone that's in law enforcement serve on this board. Possibly maybe even someone that doesn't have like a law degree would be good.
No other lawyers like
No.
me on there.
Yeah, exactly. But a stipend for a citizen, I believe, is adequate. And then I would really like to keep it with county employees if we could. However, that may not be the case, or I know that may conflict with a lot of their schedules. But two citizens and a school board member would be, or not a school board member, but someone affiliated with the school system would be probably my recommendation.
So just clarification, so you want two citizens in the school board, or you want, like I presented, where it's one county employee, one board, and one school board employee, and one citizen?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
that would be good.
And just to get a general consensus, is that what everyone's leaning towards, is to keep the citizen on this board?
That would make it more fair.
Well, what happens if you don't get any volunteers? You say county employee,
I'll probably have to put a contingency in here, because I'm gonna need 3 members, obviously, to break a tie. So I guess as a contingency is if there's no qualified individuals, citizen individuals, then the board will reserve the right to appoint another employee. I probably need to put that in there as a contingency, because I don't know what we're gonna get.
I think that's a good point.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I
Mr.
don't
Court.
like the fact that you're gonna appoint an employee.
Well,
That's demanding an employee to serve on that board.
sorry, I guess I should, the way I was gonna handle the way it currently is, with one citizen, one school board employee, one county employee, is that I was gonna ask for volunteers in this.
Well, that's okay, I got you
And make a
that.
selection. You're welcome to hear suggestions on that instead of appointing an employee, but I was gonna reach out the best. I've already actually had one volunteer, which it would be good, is our Hearts director has volunteered, and I think that's probably a good candidate for a county employee. Someone who knows DOT rules.
I thank you.
I've had a citizen that said they would like to serve on this. Unfortunately, he's a federal ALE officer.
Well, I'll go back to.
That's
yeah,
not
we-
in the sheriff's office.
That's not the sheriff's office.
As I can go back to, and, again, I don't, I threw that in there as having no law enforcement, active law enforcement, but again, that was just a suggestion. We can back off that if we're thinking we want to open the pool up a little bit more.
I don't think we're gonna have an issue filling these.
A lot of these issues should be fairly cut and dry. I mean, if you've got a camera, you've got pretty good evidence there.
Yeah, and all this is going to be just, following procedure to make sure we follow, general legal procedure. As I said, again, that's why either I or Thomas will be there at all times. And hopefully with these packages that they'll be an easier task where it won't require a whole lot of training other than just making sure I get them to follow, proper legal procedures and making their decisions.
So, Commissioners, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I hear consensus that we're good with these, with the criteria that Mr. Appel has presented, but possibly with the caveat that should we not be able to fill one of the spots with a resident, that there would be an option to get that third spot from either a school employee or a county employee. Everybody agreeable with that? Mr. McCoy?
And then do you like, I got the preferred background and knowledge, but not a requirement. As far as a criminal background, do you want a minimum standard on there on criminal backgrounds on these individuals? Whether, no felonies or no traffic convictions with a certain period of time. I can, we don't make that requirement for other boards, but it's one that I just threw it out there as a possible qualification or disqualification.
Any thoughts? I really believe that there should be a minimum standard with regard to criminal background check for that as well, so.
Okay.
I also think the, like a moving violation, if they're out there speeding or getting a bunch of traffic tickets themselves, probably shouldn't be on.
Yeah,
with that.
I would put, if we're gonna do it, because I did throw the suggestions, no criminal traffic convictions, or citations. Probably my suggestion is put a cap on that, because I think a lot of
Yeah.
citizens over the course of their driving career have probably
About like
been
the
stopped
last
for
3
something.
years.
So, like that's why I was gonna suggest maybe no convictions in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion? So is this item with these additions that we have mentioned that you would feel comfortable putting on the consent agenda? Or is this something you think we'd need to discuss further next week?
No, I'm good with it.
I think the consent agenda is fine.
Okay. And one other thing, and this is related to the appeals board, it's not going into the bylaws, but since we're discussing here today, one of the questions in my weekly meetings with Bus Patrol as they create the citation for me to my review, is they want to know when and where to hold these things. It was gonna be my suggestion to, let's just say the second week, or the second Wednesday of every month, because they need to be held every month. So that was gonna be my suggestion, but the location, us, we need to hold it in a place where we can probably hold a number of people, that way we can record and is easily accessible by citizens. So, you got a few spots. You've got downstairs training rooms, you can do the commons, you've got the planning boardroom, and then you have here. I'm not sure how the board's feeling is on using this room, but this one is always open, and when it runs into a conflict of scheduling with the training room or taking up plannings, or, the health department uses the commons. But I'm open to suggestions, but we do need to locate an area to do this that makes it easy, again, for individuals to come in and we can record these hearings.
My suggestion is you have it in the training room. That's why this building was built, to be used.
Okay. Any other commissioners have any thoughts on that? Everybody feel good about the training room, so I guess we could,
So schedule training
we
room.
just have to block that out on that second Wednesday.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And I believe you have the next item as well, Mr. Rappel, discussion of a requested utility easement along the Dunn-Irwin Rail Trail for a proposed solar farm.
I'll pass this out. When Melissa comes back in, I was gonna have her pull up on GIS.
I'm sorry, I had her make a copy of something.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and pass these out while we're waiting. It's hard to see on here, so that's why I was gonna have Melissa pull up the GIS to show this area a little bit more clearly.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
And I believe Mr. Charlie McClure is on the phone, who's the project manager for this. Melissa, can you pull GIS? So what this is, there's been a request. There's a proposed solar farm that wants to go in on near Ash Avenue. And they are requesting an underground utility easement. If you don't mind just zooming in a little bit, Melissa, on the left side of that highlighted blue. See where the fork is? On the hot, yeah. Can you zoom in on that area? Okay, that should be good. So that highlighted portion, what you're seeing on the screen, as you go to the left of the fork, this is all part of the Dunn-Irwin Rail Trail. And so what's been requested by the proposed solar farm is to run an underground, have an underground utility easement that runs along the rail trail from the proposed site, which is just north of the GIS on there, but it's it's undeveloped farmland, and run that all the way down, crossing over Suggs Road there and going down to, there's a Duke Energy site there, As, right before you get to, was it Irwin?
Urban Access
Irwin
Road.
Access Road, sorry. It's just right above that is the Duke Power Station. Wanted to bring this easement request to you to have a discussion. We brought it last week before the Rail Trail Authority to have a discussion about this. So this is something we haven't done before. We don't have third-party utility easements on our rail trails, and so that's why I wanted to have a discussion with you of whether this is something we want to do. As of right now, the rail trail is developed as it goes up to the fork and then comes back down. It's undeveloped right now as it goes north, and that goes north towards our towards the landfill. That is completely undeveloped. So we had a discussion of how they're going to run it. They're going to run it as close to the line as possible, going towards that utility station, close to the edge of the property as possible. It would not go under the trail itself. They would use a ditch witch to bore under to place this line. And so the question to come up is, how much removal of trees would this require? And it was minimal to none. Trees would try to be removed because, again, we want to keep it not one, it's a nature trail, and two, it's important to keep a natural barrier to keep out ATVs and other utility vehicles off the trail. Question of where they would access, they said they'd be accessing the trail primarily from the existing access point on Suggs Road. For the northern wooded section, they'd be accessing the parcel from Ash Avenue. There would be, I think, no closures or minimal closure. The time to complete installation is approximately 2 weeks, so we're not looking at a long time period to put this in. So hopefully, minimal disruption. They would obviously rope off the area that they're digging, but the idea is they would not have to close the rail trail itself, except if they have to dig under a portion, because I think as they come up to the fork, they'll probably have to, because they'll have to go under the trail there. That may require a temporary closure. And the installation is likely to occur the second half of next year if we were to grant an easement. So one we need to decide is whether we want to grant this easement, allow a third-party utility easement here. And if we do allow it, then obviously we'll have to talk about compensation, whether, because we'll have to get adequate compensation for this, whether that is purely monetary or there are other options have been thrown out, such as clearing on the northern end where it's undeveloped, is clearing out a portion of the northern end for future trail development. But those are ideas that are being thrown around. That's if we decide to move forward with an easement, we can discuss those kinds of options. But if there's any questions, further questions about this, happy to answer them again. Mr. McClure, who's the project manager, is on the line to also assist in answering any questions you may have.
Commissioners, any questions you'd like to ask at this time? Mr. Davis, can I put you on the spot and ask for your thoughts on this, since this obviously falls under your leadership with the rail trails?
Yes, sir. We spoke with Rail Trail Authority, which I sit on, plus Brian sits on, a couple other people, and we feel confident that it's not going to be a big issue to put it there. Obviously there's a little bit of small issues with it as far as we already have an issue with ATVs in that area coming on. So anything that they put, any trees that get cleared from the Y towards Ash Avenue, we feel like it can be another access point for people to get on. That is our biggest issue. We can obviously take care of that with some bollards and things, so we feel like we can take care of it. It's not a big issue. And also, as Chris mentioned, you talk about concessions and compensation. The Greenway plan actually shows the trail continuing up the section that we're talking about here, where they would come down, running all the way into Custon and Andrew. So it may be an opportunity for us to go ahead and start moving on the Greenway segment there also, giving another point of access to the Dunham Rail Trail for citizens. So there's positives to it, there's also negatives, but I think that from talking to Mr. McClure and the kind of things that we talked about, what we needed out of it, I think the Rail Trail Authority felt okay with it, as long as we were able to kind of just keep in discussions before it was put in.
Yeah, I think the rail trail concern was just making sure, again, that as little disruption as possible, not interrupting schedules, not interrupting trees, not interrupting, people using this trail. I think that was the main concern. And then, again, they were also asking questions about the various options that would be available for adequate compensation for this, whether there could be anything that could benefit the Rail Trail Authority and them, running this trail.
Commissioner Weatherspoon, I think I cut you off while ago. Were you going to ask a question?
No, Carl answered my question.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioners have any questions or comments at this time regarding this request? Okay, hearing none, then I'm assuming that there is no opposition to proceeding with this. See none, then is this also something we can put on the consent agenda, or something you think we'll need to?
It may, I would just suggest maybe discuss a little more, because I can go ahead and draft an easement, but regarding compensation, that may be some
Further discussions.
further discussion that
Sure.
we had at this time, to see what our options are at this point. But I can move forward with drafting an easement and getting this underway.
So I think that's, the plan then would be to continue to move forward with working on the language that will be involved and compensation, whatever that might be, and getting that nailed down before we make a final decision.
And I'll hold off on putting this on the agenda for right now, because it probably may
Right.
require getting appraisal and so on, so
Sure.
this may take a little bit of time.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, thank you, Mr. Pell.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Haney, a discussion of facility rental policies and staffing needs.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm here this morning to revisit the discussion we had a couple of weeks ago regarding the rental of county facilities. 2 weeks ago, I mentioned 3 facilities the county currently has available. Those include the commons area between the health department and DSS, the training rooms located in the resource center and library, 2 classrooms in the Shawtown Community Development Center, and then additionally, the library maintains a meeting room and a study room that they make available to the public and schedule internally. And also Parks and Recreation manages rentals of the Anderson Creek Senior Center, the Barbecue Creek Park Multipurpose Room, and the Boone Trail Community Center Meeting Room. They have their own policy and rental packet for those spaces. In looking at the space at Shawtown, it is very similar to the other spaces that Parks and Recreation already manages in their rental packet. So if there are no objections from the board, staff would recommend including that space in with the other locations that they have in their rental packet. Is there any, instead of having a single policy for that, it kind of fits in with what else they're doing?
Mr. Davis, you okay with adding that to your list?
Yes, sir.
Any objections to that suggestion? Okay, I think we're all good with that.
Okay. So that leaves the commons area and the training rooms in this building. And it seems the major 2 issues before you are what uses to permit in the training rooms, and then what changes, if any, you wish to make to the existing commons room policy. Regarding the training rooms, we moved into the new resource center and library in late February and initially made the training rooms available to county departments and other governmental functions. One of the major reasons the training rooms were included in this project was that there is very little space for large training events and meetings in the county. One goal of this space was to provide an area where countywide trainings and meetings could take place, which would lessen the burden on the commons for accommodating these meetings and would create more availability for the public meetings and events that have previously taken place at the commons. We've also seen issues with county training spaces that currently exist, such as in the Harnett County Sheriff's Office, that initially were used for training by those departments, but as departments have grown and kind of expanded, the needs of the department have changed, and those rooms are less accommodating than they previously had been. So we've seen a lot of departments like the sheriff's office come to this building to host trainings. So to date, the training rooms have seen substantial use by county departments. This week, in fact, the space is being used by the Harnett County Public Library for a partnership with GlaxoSmithKline to host a STEM program for children in the county, which, you know, a big deal for the county to be able to bring that in. We are at the time still transitioning from the COVID pandemic and have yet to fully realize the intended benefits of this space for county functions, including training, meetings, and programming, both for county employees and for the public. One thing the county is sorely lacking, you'll probably hear about this during your strategic planning retreat coming up, is training opportunities for our employees and opportunities for professional growth and development. That's something that obviously we would like to host more of in this space. So as we continue moving through the pandemic, we anticipate county departments using this space to provide more programming for the public in addition to that of county employees. Also, as you mentioned this morning, the bus patrol hearings will start taking place downstairs as well. So we are seeing an increased use of this space. Staff also have a number of concerns related to opening these spaces up to reservation by the public. Unlike the commons, which can be accessed from outside independently from other county departments, the training room is located within this building, which will require additional staff to manage, particularly after normal business hours. This space also has more complex operations, including the external glass and internal partitions to subdivide the room, the HVAC system, as well as audio-visual equipment that requires more involvement from staff to manage, particularly because the space can be subdivided and you can have multiple events with multiple AV capability going on at one time. The space also has carpet, which creates more concerns regarding damage due to food and drink and general wear and tear. Additionally, the county has not at this time budgeted for the additional staff or costs that would be involved in opening this space up for events scheduled by the public. And at this time, we do not feel we have the appropriate staff capacity to effectively manage that. The recommendation from staff at this time would be to continue reserving the training rooms for county departments and other government functions, at least until we have more information and can bring forward recommendations in terms of utilization of the space, along with the costs to the county and of staffing needs. As I mentioned earlier, one of the main purposes of this space is to be used by county departments and other government entities to provide programming that directly benefits our citizens, such as the one I mentioned from the library. And as we continue to transition through the pandemic, we anticipate more programming being offered to the public by our departments. Regarding that piece, are there any comments or questions at this time?
Any questions or comments from Mr. Taney?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to see this tabled to the first work session in August. You walk in here and you hand me a 3 or 4 page document and you want me to make a decision based on that. I'd like to have some time to review it.
The document I handed out is related to the commons. We have not at this time provided a draft for the training room.
I'd like to have some time to review it.
I don't have any issues with that. When is
Mr.
our?
Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
recognize me, please. I agree with Tim. I think we need some more time to review it. I remember when they first opened the complex, the governmental complex, the rules and the guidelines for that. I'm glad to see that we are getting back to that to allow the public to use it. I agree with further discussion on using this particular building here because the government complex started off the same way, but using it as county training and getting information out to the whole county and all. But I just leave it at that. I think it should be discussed.
So I believe I hear the sentiment that we would like to discuss this at a future work session, get with you and Mr. Wood and decide when that would be appropriate time. Since that is the will of the board, I would ask that, and another recommendation that you kind of brought forward this morning is that we not utilize or not make the training room available for public use. But since we are going to discuss this at a later time, during that time, I would like for staff to get together, give us some type of information as to what kind of expense we'd be talking about for somebody to oversee the area at that time, HVAC, whatever. So what kind of expense would we be looking at if we were to come up with some guidelines for public use of the facility? I obviously was not on the board at the time, but I have heard that one of the purposes of that area was that communities or community groups would be able to use it. And so I'd like for us to really explore that before we just say, take that off the table.
Yes, and certainly from a staff perspective, we're not saying that we don't think that is a beneficial use of the space. We just feel that there may be more data that needs to be analyzed.
I agree. There is a lot involved, as you know, from working with outside groups utilizing school facilities. It's a big picture. There's a lot of things that people just don't see, but I think we need to explore those for community use of this space.
Okay, we've got some of that information. Parks and Recs has been working to compile that due to the turnaround time, trying to get this on the agenda for this week. We've not completely
I understand.
got that ready, but we will have that available for you
Sounds
before
good.
we bring it back to
Yeah,
you.
thank you. And I believe you have the next item as well, Mr. Taney. That would be discussing funding operations for the NTIA Broadband Infrastructure Grant Program.
Yes, I've got the next two as well. The board voted last Monday night to authorize staff to apply for an NTIA grant, broadband infrastructure grant in the amount of $15 or so million. The grant requires a 10% match, of which the county's ISP partner, CloudWise, will pay half, which would leave the county responsible for approximately $750,000. As mentioned, the application deadline is August 17th. One outstanding question from last Monday's meeting was how the county would fund the required match. Our understanding is that funding would not need to be appropriated unless the county actually receives the grant. So this is not something that has to be appropriated today. We've had a few discussions internally. One was potentially using the American Rescue Plan funding the county has received. However, due to the fact that it is a federal grant, if we were to use that funding to match the application for the federal grant, we would not receive the points that would be awarded for having that match, and thus probably jeopardizing receiving the grant entirely. So that is not a viable option from our perspective. And then we also discussed pulling the remaining $600,000 out of the current wireless project. To our knowledge at this point, that may not be a viable option either, just because of how that project is going and slowing down the momentum from that project. So the staff recommendation at this time would be to appropriate, when the time comes, if the grant is awarded, to appropriate fund balance to cover that expense. Obviously the return on investment of spending $750,000 to get $15 million is substantial. So that would be staff's recommendation at this time.
I should point out also at that point, we should have your audit back, and we're confident that we've underspent last year's budget, so I don't think it'll be a decrease from the fund balances you have now, because you will have increased some of those beyond the $750,000 at that point.
Hopefully by that time, we will have some state broadband funding also.
Correct.
So,
And you'll also have the ability to use some of your ARP money for
Right.
broadband as well. So the good news about all this, if we can get this, if we can tap the state's broadband money, which we know is coming in their budget, we just don't know the amount yet that we can go after, and then use some of ours, I'm of the opinion that we can probably do this broadband project countywide with wireless and knock the whole thing out.
I would also, you know, I would also think there's a possibility that some of that ARP money or whatever we're called, that we might could offset some things with that would save us some money that we could put toward this as well. So I think we do have a number of options out there. I don't see any, I personally don't see any problem with saying as a last resort, no other way to get that 750,000 funded, that we could look to tap into our reserves for that. But that's just my opinion.
I would think it would, Mr. Chairman, I think it would be a combination of local/county funding and state funding if necessary.
I do believe there will be several options that we would look at, and the fact that we don't have to have the money up front today until we know if we receive the grant or not will allow us to have some more clarity with some of these things that we just don't have the clearly defined parameters of how we can use that money yet, I guess is the way I would say it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, do we have to note on the grant application how our matching, or where our matching funds would come from?
I'm not aware of that at this time. That our IT director is not here today.
But if we do, we could just put local funds
Right.
and just
Okay.
leave it at that.
Yeah.
We just put general fund, $750,000.
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Johnson. I'd like to say that as important as this is, this broadband, it has far effects in its legislative priority, for it affects our children, our students, our small businesses, school administration, large businesses. I'd like to see this pushed through just about no matter what it takes to do within reason. It's just economic development all over this broadband.
So I believe we could, correct me if you disagree, but I believe we can safely say that if we're not able to meet that local match through other sources, that we do or would be able to make that with our reserves if we had to do. Everybody good proceeding forward at that?
Yeah, I saw a
Yes,
nod
Mr.
from Miss Kimberly, so I think we're good.
I just want to say, this is bad, this is needed in this county real badly, let me say it right. Anything we do, I think we should have our financial clerk at the table too. That's just a motion for me. I think that she should be involved in anything we do as far as money, because we spend a lot of money this year, but this is very much needed, but I don't want us to make the wrong move financially.
Thank you, and I think we would all concur that we certainly need Ms. Honeycutt involved in any of these discussions with money, so. Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, are
Yes,
you
sir.
all comfortable with putting that on the consent agenda?
Yes.
I think at this point, the board has already authorized the application. So this was really, there was a request for an update at the last meeting regarding the funding, so I'm not sure that.
Right.
Well, then I guess in the alternative, I just want to make sure if we have to note that on the application, y'all are comfortable with us just saying, general fund monies
Yes.
as the match? Okay. All right, so we don't need to do anything further with this then?
So we should be good until we know something definitely about the grant.
Yes, and per the county's fiscal policies, the acceptance of the grant obviously would come back before you. You'd have all that information at the time. We anticipate at this point hearing something in November regarding whether or not the county has received this grant. Obviously, you know, with past grant applications, that may be pushed back. We don't know, but that's what we're hearing right now.
That's great. Thank you, Brian, for that update. And then next we have a discussion of American Rescue Plan Act funding. So maybe you're going to
Yes, so
tell
this
us all
kind of
this.
ties into that. I'm not going to tell you all of that today. I'm here really to provide you with a very high-level overview. And speaking with Mr. Wood, we're planning to come back to you in the next several weeks or to a month to really dive into the eligible uses of the American Rescue Plan and the other options that we have. We're waiting on the approval of a state budget, because there are a considerable amount of funds that are tied up in that. So we really don't know what else is going to be out there just yet until that has been finalized. Just to give you a high-level overview, Harnett County will receive $26,411,744 from the American Rescue Plan. Half of that amount is supposed to be dispersed somewhat upfront, with the other half to be dispersed at least 1 year after the dispersal. The funds received must be obligated by December 31st of 2024 and must be expended by December 31st of 2026. So there is a substantial amount of time, much more so than compared to the Coronavirus Relief Fund that we previously received. We have been in numerous meetings with the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office, and others, Treasury, to learn what we can about this. The Treasury guidance continues to evolve and change, if not daily, then at least weekly. So we're all still trying to understand what the implications are of this money and what the authorized uses are. One of the main recommendations that we've heard in every one of those meetings is the recommendation that jurisdictions strategically plan for this funding. There is a long time that we have to use the funds. There are opportunities to leverage these funds to go after other grants and state and federal dollars related to the pandemic, the American Rescue Plan. So that is our intent. We're hoping to come back to really give you an overview of where this fits in with the upcoming CIP process in the fall, with the ongoing strategic planning process, the economic development plan, and other plans to help you make the decisions that will best put the county forward to utilize these funds. The reason I'm here today is because the board needs to adopt a resolution to request American Rescue Plan funds, which will allow county staff to move forward with receiving the funds. The logic in this is that any earnings from the interest of this money is not restricted, so it is not held to the other requirements of the grant or the funding. So the sooner we get those funds, the more we're able to build up and hopefully maximize what we have. So with that, if there are no other questions at this time, we will move forward with putting that resolution forward at the next voting meeting on the consent agenda.
And what we plan on doing is setting up a grant fund. So all of this money would be segregated into a separate fund. That way we have a clear audit trail of everything we spent those funds for. I just want to reiterate that we're going to come back to you. It's probably going to be 4 weeks. I was debating whether to do it in 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And we're going to go over in detail with you all these various pots of money and kind of what the rules of the game are. You are going to have a very busy fall because, as he said, you're going to be getting back your economic development study probably within a month. You're going to get back your finishing up your strategic plan probably within 45 to 60 days. And then your normal CIP process has already begun here. Our department heads have already had to provide us with the projects they want in the CIP. All of that will be coming together, and your CIP is normally finished around November, where you make the decisions about what you want to fund over the next 6 years. And of course, the first year of the CIP becomes the capital budget for that next budget. So actually the timing on all of this works very well. It will all fold in together, and then you will be making the decisions at a very high level of how you want to program this money out. And the nice thing is that if you look at the dates he's talking about, you have until December of 26 to spend all of this ARP money. That's basically 5 years. That's 5 years and 5 months. So by the time you finish your CIP, you'll have a full 5 years to spend this. The nice thing is your CIP goes out 6 years. So our intent is that hopefully you as the board will make decisions in that CIP and, allocate out, this is the plan of how we want to spend these various monies. And included in that will be what we think we can go after from the state's pot for ARP money as well. And that's why we're waiting a month, because it appears that it may take more than 2 weeks for the state to finish their budget. And while we don't have to have all the details, what we do want is, we do know from the seminars that Brian's been attending, that the state is going to run their ARP money through their budget. And so they're going to appropriate the various pots of money they want for what. For instance, we know that they want to make a big push on broadband, which is great because that's your highest priority. But we don't know the number yet. And then what will happen is, of course, we have 100 counties. Then the state will come along and say, well, here's the application process, here's what we're looking for, here's where we give you points for your project, all that. Then we'll have to go through and do a formal application process. We don't know what that looks like yet, but we want to know what their pots of money are. And then once we have that, we'll be able to go through there and tell you that the state has appropriated, has this amount of money, and here's the things, and the discussion we'll have with you is, let's talk about what we, as Harnett County, want to go after in that state budget. So you have the $26.4 million that we're getting, then we'll be able to go after money that's in the state ARP allocations. Okay? So that's all about what we want to talk about. And then the other pot of money obviously will be the money we would normally put in our CIP from our regular revenues. So all of that should be wrapped up by the end of November, and you should have a solid plan, strategic plan going forward. So that's kind of where we're coming from, but I'm gonna drill down into some of the details with you in roughly a month, and we'll go through that. But that's, and as Brian said, as we got into this, it became crystal clear to us that there was no reason to wait on the money because we can be earning interest on it. I mean, we know we don't get a lot of interest, but at least we get some. And as he pointed out, that money can be used for any legal purpose. So that's just additional money that we can draw down and go ahead and start using. But we will be coming back to you as well before we get that money. And I'll be getting with Kimberly on that, and we will be setting up and having you vote on the grant fund, which will segregate these funds so that when we get that money in, we can go ahead and deposit it into the appropriate fund. One other thing I did want to mention, I just want to say a word. Brian, Kimberly, and Lisa, I pretty much assigned this to Brian to head up. They have done a very good job of tracking down all this information. It hasn't been that easy because it keeps coming out in drips and drabs, and one day you think the rules are A, and a week later they're B. And so if it seems like it's taken a while, one of the reasons is we're all feeling our way through this. And the reality is the federal government's feeling its way through it. You know, if they would make up their mind on the rules, you know, then we know where we're going. But from a timing standpoint, we have plenty of time on this. And again, what I'm trying to get to is that hopefully by the end of November, with your capital improvements process, we should have all this stuff nailed down, and you'll have a game plan for going forward on the capital side.
Well, thank you so much. That sounds like very good news, and I know everybody's anxiously awaiting the parameters that'll come with the money. So we'll work our way through it as they continue to become available. And thank you, Mr. Taney, for your leadership, and Ms. Honeycutt and Ms. Lisa. I appreciate y'all's hard work on that and the information you've shared with us this morning. Any questions or comments, commissioners, you'd like to ask Mr. Taney, or City Code, before he steps down?
I,
Ms. McCoy?
I don't have any questions or anything, but I'm glad to see that, Mr. Wood put the right committee together to follow this money. Simply because it's a lot of money that's coming into North Carolina. And hopefully, a lot of that money is gonna be coming to Harnett County. And I'm glad to see that we all will play a part in how that money will be spent. Because I wanna see the money spent equally across Harnett County for the needs for all the citizens, just not for a few. So, thank you, Brian. I know I've worried you to death about this, but I appreciate you.
Well, and I just want to echo that, you know, our intent would be, as you're going through this kind of process, is that we would have some public input sessions
Right.
on this. Even more so than you would normally do on a normal CIP,
Right.
because this is a tremendous one-time shot of money that we can do some significant things with. So I agree with your comments that we need to have some public input as, you know, as we go forward, once we know what the parameters are.
And at this time, as we are receiving interest from members of the community and other organizations, partners, we're compiling that, and we'll obviously bring that before you as well. But some is coming in. Obviously, it's a great deal of money coming to the county.
Very good. Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Haney. Appreciate that. Next, Mr. Wood, recommendation on septic tank hauler and portable toilet wastewater treatment plant fees.
Cody, have you got that comment? Well, I've given you the memo back on July the 7th. And then, of course, I've been out for a couple of weeks, but just briefly to go back over that, some of you have been contacted by some of the septic and portable waste haulers to review our rates, and because they felt that they were much higher than surrounding counties and cities. And they also expressed a concern about the reduced hours because we had changed from 7 a.m. to opening at 8 a.m. So what we did is we had Shannon with my office conduct a survey. I listed the information I wanted. We've given you that survey of some of the major counties and cities and what their rates are. And also, when we contacted the city of Greensboro, they had done a similar rate study in 2019, which is still fairly current information. So what I'd like to start off with is actually the process we use. One of the things when you get into this is a lot of the cities and counties who allow private waste haulers to come in and empty septic tanks and also portable toilets is they just let them come and dump right at the beginning of what's called headworks in your wastewater treatment. At the beginning of a wastewater treatment plant is you have what's called a grit chamber, and that literally just lets the sand and stuff like that settle out. Okay. The second part of that is what's called a bar screen. Bar screen captures things like rags and sticks and stuff like that, big debris. And so we get that out. And then a lot of them, then it just goes right into their normal process for wastewater at the plant. Now, the danger with that is sometimes you can get a spike in some of the nutrient levels and things that are in that waste. Harnett County is fortunate because, as I said in the memo, when you took over Lillington's wastewater treatment plant, at a later date, you then came along and built a $7.5 million wastewater treatment plant. You have taken that old plant and basically made it this septic hauler system. So you actually have a separate system. And what we've got the plant up here, but it's not in enough detail. What we want to do at the meeting on next Monday is because I'm going to have photographs of various components for you to look at. But essentially, after it leaves the bar screen, it then goes into what are called clarifiers. Well, those are just concrete basins, and wastewater treatment is actually a pretty simple process. What you're doing is you're allowing the solids over a period of time to settle out. And then you take the overflow water, which is somewhat cleaner than, you pump that, and here we pump it, if you look at that big picture, we pump it to lagoons, that big lagoon. All the lagoon does is allow it to further settle. But you also have microscopic bugs in there, and they're eating some of the stuff. So wastewater treatment is actually a biological and chemical process. So they're eating the sludge. So what you're left with then is some more solids. Then what we do at our plant is we actually have rigged up what they call a mini dredge. And from one side of that lagoon to the other, they have run a metal cable, and that keeps the dredge online. But they can move that dredge along that cable, and it allows them to then, a dredge of course sucks up stuff at the bottom, you know, like a sand dredge, just sucks up the sand out of the water. It does the same thing. Then by hoses, you don't see them on there, they send that to two 600,000 gallon clarifiers. And clarifiers again are just large concrete round structures, and that allows still more settlement to go on. Okay? And then the overflow water from that at the top becomes clearer and clearer. You then, that water at the overflow top is drained off, and it goes circulated into our regular wastewater treatment plant and goes through the normal process because it's already gone through a number of steps in the process. So what happens with the sludge? Well, the sludge from the clarifier is then pumped out. And where it goes is to the centrifugal pumps that pump into those. And just think of it like really large dryers, if you will. It's been around centrifugal. Well, the centrifugal force is pushing the water out of that sludge. So it's basically a dewatering unit. And as I said in here, the reason for doing that is the liquid in there is 98% water, 2% sludge. When we get through going through that centrifugal force, you have taken roughly 24% of the volume out. You've taken that much water out. Why is that critical? Because we have to pay so much per ton to landfill the sludge. So if we can reduce that volume by 24%, you basically cut your bill by 24% on the landfill. And by far, the largest cost to us is landfill. Now, our costs are higher than a number of other places for two reasons, and I want to go over that with you. Number one, we do not have a landfill. We have a C&D landfill. A C&D landfill is unlined. It is not a subpart D lined landfill, which is what you have to have for municipal type waste. That's why we have a contract, to take it out of the county and dispose of it. Well, we have to do the same thing here because you cannot put this sludge in a C&D landfill. It has to be a lined landfill, and that's to protect the groundwater. Okay. So we have a higher cost in a number of these places because we don't have a landfill, and there is a cost to transport that. And then there's a cost to pay those people whatever their fee is, per ton to dispose of. The second reason we're higher is the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. That's who oversees all the water and sewer treatment plants and water lines and all that in the state. What they do is when they put in new environmental regulations and tighten things down, many of y'all are my age, it goes back to the 1972 Clean Water Act, all that started, you know, they gave you grants to upgrade your plants and things like that. But what they do is, with your existing plants, they won't make you meet those higher standards, but they keep tightening them down to protect the water quality. So what happens is when you go to expand the plant, or you go to build a new plant, that's when they come back. And if you remember, you just approved doing an engineering, the preliminary engineering on our expansion of the North Harnett wastewater treatment plant. And you remember that engineering study is to do the preliminary engineering, but also go through the permitting process. Well, that's the permitting process. The NPDES permit is what allows you to discharge into the waters of North Carolina. That is when they tighten down. So if you have a more recent plant or a more recent expansion than other places, they put higher standards on it. And as I said in here, one of the issues for us is they have us on, let me find that. They basically have us at 4.5%, I think, on nitrogen and 1.5 on phosphorus. That may not mean a lot to you, but it's milligrams per liter. In other words, that's how much of those pollutants, those nutrients, you are allowed to discharge into the state's waters. And consistently, what continues to happen is they keep tightening down on those. And of course, that is for a good societal reason. We're trying to keep our waters clean and that sort of thing. So I wanted you to understand that, because what we have done is I've given you 3 ways to look at this issue. If you look at it on a purely cost basis, we're actually losing about $51,000 a year right now. In other words, our costs are exceeding our revenues. If this was a standalone operation, about $51,000. We do have the opportunity, and we're working on it, to renegotiate these landfill fees, because that's the biggest cost component we have. So I'm fairly confident we're going to be able to get that down somewhat. But if you lower the rates, whatever you lower it, that's going to create a bigger deficit on our running this component of Harnett Regional Water. What I've recommended to you is looking at 5 different ways of looking at it. The first is, if you look at purely at the rates based on these surveys, we are higher than most people. But I've explained to you why. We're higher because of the landfill costs, and we're higher because we have to meet tighter nutrient levels. Okay. So what I had given you in this report said it was costing us about 9.1 cents per gallon. Well, that translates into $91 per 1,000 gallons, and that's what we've been looking at. So if you look at it, that's 91. Okay, we charge 85, and we charge a $20 hookup fee. Okay, so with that, we're actually losing about $51,000 a year. Now, there's no question we're higher. So if you look at it strictly on how we stack up to other people, then you may want to reduce the rate. Okay. If you do that, we need to understand that it will create a deficit in this component. But of course, we operate Harnett Regional Water as a combined utility. It's water, wastewater, and I would argue this is almost a totally separate operation here for the sludge handling. So combined, Harnett County is doing fine financially. So that's the cost of service. Subsequent to my doing this memo for you, I've got a report from Mr. McFadden, Member McFadden, and they've given me the numbers for this year, and now it's about roughly 10 cents. So if anything, our deficit has grown a little bit. So, but again, we are working very hard to try to get a reduction in those landfill fees. So that's the cost. I do say in here, the other thing is, so the cost of service, if you went on the cost of service, you wouldn't do anything. You just leave the rates where they are. If you go on the comparison with other jurisdictions, we are higher. And so we may want to adjust the rates for that. And then I gave you a comparison of what citizens on our public sewer system pay versus a customer who would periodically have to clean out his septic tank. Okay. So having said that, what I'm recommending to you is that if you decide to take the rates down, I would not recommend that you take them down any further than to go from $85 to $65, which is a $20 per 1,000 gallon reduction. That is going to cost us $78,000. So if we're already 51,000 short, and then 78,000, it would be a $130,000 deficit. Again, to reiterate, we think we can cut some of that, but I can't give you an assurance today that we're going to be able to renegotiate that landfill fee lower. But we're trying to do that. We feel pretty good about it, but it's not going to do away with $130,000. It's still going to be somewhat of a deficit. So those are your options as to what you want to do with it. And I hope I've given you a fairly detailed explanation of why our rates are what they are, how they compare with these other jurisdictions, and then I try to give you some options on how to deal with it. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Any questions, any questions or further comments?
I have a comment. So now, Harnett Regional, the way that you just explained it, that with the water and then the wastewater with Harnett Regional Water, and then this, I mean, that's still under Harnett Regional Water,
Yeah,
correct? So, I mean, $120,000 compared to the overall outlook of what Harnett Regional Water does, I mean, this being a service, I mean, I would almost think that it's a drop in the bucket, no pun intended. But, like, it's kind of like the chicken when you go to Costco or whatever, you know, it's super cheap, you know, for other things, but I mean, they get you on, you know, the other side. So, we're triple and at least double everything, all the other surrounding counties. So, my recommendation would be to take it down to 65. I don't think that would put HRW in too much of a bind at all. So that's my recommendation on that. And then I have another question, just from my own personal knowledge. How much would it cost how much would a line landfill cost?
I'm sorry.
How much
Line
would,
landfill?
correct?
Millions.
Millions?
Millions.
Okay.
I can get you a more refined number. I'm not
No, that's fine. I mean, it just seems like the pleasure is worth more than the pain when you look at it that way. Doing it like
The
this.
biggest problem with the landfill is not paying for it, it's site. It's an empty. No, everybody wants one, nobody wants it near them. That's generally what happens. And so the trend has been going more to regional type things. And that's apparently what this county chose at some point along the line. We can explore that if that is an issue that y'all want to discuss. I can tell you they're extremely expensive.
Yeah, that was just from my own personal knowledge.
Well, you have to put in they're literally lined, think of it like it's like a big swimming pool. And so it's completely lined, And then down in the bottom of that, you have to put in what's called a leachate collection system. Because once you create that barrier, which is to protect the groundwater, once you create that barrier, every day that it rains, that water eventually is going to seep through the ground and it's going to sit in the bottom of that bathtub, so to speak. And so you have to pump that leachate out. It's highly toxic because think about everything people throw away. You know, aerosol sprays, household cleaning products, stuff like that. And that's why the state requires that. That protects all of that mess from getting into our groundwater. Well, so you have to pump that leachate out, and then you have to have sewer lines and then take that to your wastewater treatment plant, and you process all of that. So that's the process in a nutshell. And then you have to have groundwater monitoring wells all around. Because if you should spring a leak or something, we need to be able to track those groundwater monitoring wells as your early warning system that, hey, we got a problem. Because they will create a flume of toxic water. And that picks that up, and then we can go in and take corrective actions there. And so I say all of that to say, it is a very, very expensive process. And counties who have landfills do everything they can to minimize what goes in there because the space is so expensive per cubic yard. And that's why they do C&D landfills for the inert, matter. Because everything you can keep out of it is a tremendous savings. So I hope I've given you an explanation.
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with what Commissioner Nichols said. I would I think we should take it down to $65 per thousand, maintain the $20 per load, and in addition, open at 7 a.m., close at 6 p.m., and develop a written policy for emergency situations such as between 6 p.m. and 7 a.m., as well as state of emergencies due to hurricanes, tornadoes, and other acts of God.
Any, Mr. Johnson, Ms. McCoy, you have any thoughts? Anything you'd like to?
Mr. Johnson, I'd like to agree with what Commissioner Weatherspoon said.
For Commissioner McCoy, I don't understand the motion. I don't understand why we would reduce it, since we've had it at these rates for so many years. So that's all I gotta say.
Mr. Chairman, what I'm hearing then is the consensus is you want it on the agenda and you want it basically as you just stated. Is that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That'd be fine, and we'll put it as standalone so we can further discuss at that time before we move to make any decisions on that matter.
Okay.
Any further questions or comments on this matter today? Okay, that will bring us to the next item on the agenda, which is a review of the executive search firm's responses to the RFP for the county manager recruitment process. Mr. Wood.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Wood, excuse me a second. I can give you what I wrote out here. After
and I'd like to get it right after the meeting because we're
Yeah.
going to finish the agenda today.
Yeah.
Y'all have gone out with a request for qualifications, I believe back in May, for executive search firms to help hire the next county manager. There was not a great response to that. Y'all asked us to go back out. We did that, and we sent out to approximately 15 firms. And I used the list that we had prepared in Buncombe County when I went through that process there. And the reason is we had done a fairly detailed search, for who the leading companies are throughout the country. So we sent out this revised RFQ recently, and we sent to all 15 firms. We basically had 7, some of those which had already applied, we kept those in the, if you remember, we did not kick them out. We said we would keep those, but we would go with an additional request. Since then, one of those has dropped out, so we're down to 6. And what I would like to do is hopefully by next Monday is y'all make a decision on the top 2 or 3 so that we can interview them. The reason I want to move forward with this is I've already been here almost 3 months. And so, the clock is kind of ticking on the hours I've got that I can be with you. So we really do need to get on this process. As you read through these, you'll see that most of them are saying the process for them takes 90 to 120 days. Now, getting somebody in the chair takes a little longer because what they're saying is until you've made your selection, we've negotiated a contract with them, you have the manager under contract, and they're ready to go. But as I've stated to you before, most of these people have a contract. And while the board would have to pay them severance in the event of, terminating the contract, they also have notice obligations. These are not jobs you give a 2-week notice and walk out the door. So typically they would have a 30 to 60 day notice there that they've got to work out. Now, sometimes the board that they're leaving, if they're leaving in good circumstances and all, may cut that time for them as a courtesy. Particularly if they have someone that they can put in as an interim manager without much of a problem. But I'm saying all of that to say that we could be looking at another 5 months. And so that's why I've cut back to 4 days a week. But we really do need to make this decision and get on with it. And I don't know that going out for a 3rd round would do any good because we've tapped it. We've tapped the market. So it is what it is. And so I don't know if you want to discuss these today or if you want to go over them Monday or however you want to do it. But my hope would be is that come Monday, we can nail down the top 3. Then we'll schedule interviews for you with them. Let them typically make about an hour presentation. A lot of that is going to be a repeat of what, the printed material you had, but it allows you to see the principal person that you're going to be dealing with, because we always have them, whoever, each one of these is assigned a lead person. Well, that's the person we want to see, because that's the person you're going to be dealing with. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll open it up for any questions or comments or whatever.
I have a question. Are there any factors or is there a reason why we have such a low response that we've been getting from these firms?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I do know that you have, in here, you have 2 firms that do have a lot of experience in North Carolina. And I don't want to prejudice the discussion, but I will say this. They can all do the recruitment. They can all do the manager profile, walk you through that. You guys determine what you're looking for. That's the manager profile. They can all do the brochures. They can all do the recruitment. What you're really paying for that's extra is their contacts in the county manager and city manager realm. So if you give me a firm out of Illinois, one of these is from California, if you go down their list of clients, they don't have anybody east of the Mississippi River. So in terms of knowing existing managers, that they could go out and recruit. Because instead of just applying to the advertisements we're gonna put out there, the recruitment firms should be able to identify known managers that have a known reputation, ideally in North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, somewhere like that. And they literally pick up the phone, call them, and say, we're doing an executive search for Harnett County, North Carolina. I think you'd be a good fit. Would you be interested? And then they go into, all the background on Harnett County. That is the action that you did. And so, my personal opinion and what I would recommend to you is look very carefully at their client list, their recent client list, and see who have they placed where in North Carolina. And if not North Carolina, at least Virginia, South Carolina, and Georgia. You have to get them in the Southeast, because that way you've got people that you have a better chance of recruiting in here.
You're right, there's one firm that has never placed anybody in North Carolina.
Right, I went through them and I made notes on that.
And I question why.
Right. Well, a lot of these places start out, they start out regional, because they start out like any small firm, and then you kind of build your base. But yeah, I mean, you can tell from the clients that some of these are Midwest. I mean, one of them had a lot predominantly in the Midwest, but they have migrated into Florida. So at some point, they opened an office in Florida, and they're building that client base. So I'm not saying necessarily rule anybody out like that, but if you're looking for people who personally know city and county managers in North Carolina, you probably want to look at somebody who has done multiple searches in recent years in North Carolina and has placed people. Because they may have had somebody who came in second at a city, but is an excellent manager. Just the person who won was a better personality fit with that particular role. But, they're going to make a note that this is a good one. And in the future, if we have another vacancy, we need to make a note that that's somebody worth calling. And that's what you're paying for.
Mr. Wood, I did not bring the list of firms, but there's one firm in, I think they're in Virginia. Do you know, can you give me the name of that firm?
Yeah, bear with me just a minute. It's Baker Tilly. They're out of Plano, Texas, and also Tysons, Virginia.
There's another firm that you had mentioned that you had used before, I believe.
I have used Slavin and Associates.
Slavin, yeah.
They're out of Atlanta.
Okay, I was thinking Virginia. But
I
yeah.
used them in Statesboro, Georgia. I was the manager there. When I left, the mayor asked me to help them go through a consultant selection. And so they ended up taking Slavin, and they did a good job for them.
Well, having reviewed the applications, proposals we got, my top two would be Slavin and Ellis Hankins firm. And the only reason for Ellis, it scares me, but he's in Raleigh. I mean, he's
in
local.
Raleigh, and they have placed a lot in North Carolina.
They have. It scares me, but
But
I'd rather have him than somebody from California.
so the other thing about Slavin, I did want to let you know I had a second engagement with them. When I went to Buncombe County as their interim manager, we went through this process, and the board there selected Slavin as well, and they did a very good job. And going back to my point, Matt, about paying for their contacts in the state. The person we ended up, not we, the person the board ended up hiring in Buncombe County, did not respond to the ad. They recruited her. And she's doing an excellent job. And she was the deputy manager down in New Hanover County. So we got a manager with North Carolina experience. She had been the finance director. She'd been a longtime deputy manager. She knew North Carolina law. You know, it was a good fit. And she's been there about 3 years now and doing a good job. So my experiences with Slavin have been positive. I have been on the recruitment end with Mercer, where I was a candidate. Okay. And they run a good process.
They do. They run a good process.
So I can't say anything negative about either firm.
For my opinion, for whatever it's worth, probably worth what you're going to pay for it. But I would consider Slavin and Mercer.
Do y'all want to vote on Monday on that, or?
Yeah, I think, as you said, we have been going through this process for some time, and I think I don't really see, personally, I don't see any benefit in going back out again. I think we take what we've got and make a decision from those who've expressed an interest in working with us. And so I think if it's okay with my fellow commissioners, I would ask everyone to look over those materials if you've not already, and have a come to a point where you are ready to be supportive of at least two of these, well, we'll say no more than three, but at least two of these firms for us to talk to and interview with, and we can make that decision on Monday. Johnson,
Mr.
Corey, you
Chairman.
okay with that?
Mr. Chairman, I have
Yes.
a question. If whoever we select as a search firm, I understand your time constraints, and in order to try to move forward as quickly as possible. One thing, whoever we select to interview, I think we need to try to do it before the end of August. Taking into account that, we're going to be gone part of August. The other thing is, are we prepared after we interview one of these firms, turn them loose? Do we know what we are looking for as a manager?
Well, that's the first step in the process. Here, just to reiterate the process a little bit. When you interview these folks, you pull the trigger and say, I want that firm. And they've already given you what their fee structure is. We'll turn around, Chris Bell and I will turn around, and we'll knock out a contract with them very quickly, because they have a fairly standard contract. We'll get them under contract. First order of business is they need to come in here and they're going to meet with you. And the process will be that they will have a lengthy meeting with you, at which point they're going to ask you to tell them what you're looking for. So that process will basically be, what are your priorities in terms of a manager? I mean, some things are givens, but for instance, you have the third largest water and sewer, county-owned water and sewer district system in the state of North Carolina. You need somebody that is experienced in water and sewer utilities. That's not true for every county, but it is definitely true for Harnett County. So you want that. You obviously want somebody who's very strong in finance, because you've got a lot of long-range planning issues. They're going to talk about, you've obviously got growth issues. So you want somebody who's got experience with development policies, planning and zoning, subdivision regulations, things like that. so that's what they're gonna walk you through. And a lot of this stuff you already know, we just haven't listed it yet. But you know what your issues are. You've got a good grasp on what your issues are. And that should lead to, we're looking at the leader who can come in and assist you in meeting those needs and emphasizing that. So once you have the manager profile, then we've determined, okay, here's the specifics of what we want to emphasize. Then they can do the recruitment. And that's when they do the advertisement and all of that. And that advertisement will emphasize the things you're looking for that are more or less the mandatory things, the preferred things, and the desired things. And so you're basically telling them this is what we're looking for. And smart managers will tailor their cover letter and their resume to make sure that they've emphasized to you that they have background in every one of those areas. And that helps you in trying to facilitate the discussion when you get to an interview process with them. So that's how it will work. Then they do the advertisements, and then they also do what we talked about in response to Matt's question about the people they think, you know, that they're aware of from previous searches that would be a good fit for Harnett County. Then they pick up the phone and they recruit some of them too and say, you know, I think, you know, if the timing's right for you and you want to make a move, we think this is a good opportunity. So that's how all that will work out. So to answer your question, I think you know what you're looking for. I think you just got to sit through a 3 or 4 hour session and nail it down as a body. Because this is a joint decision, it's what you come to a consensus on that you're looking for.
The question is, would doing that speed up the process?
Well, actually, you know, I've looked at that, but really the consultants should be in on that process because they take it from there and the ad comes up. I think we can have somebody on board mid-August. I don't think it'll take the end of August. I'll expedite it on the front end with the contract. You pick the firm, we'll get them in here.
I have probably a procedural question. I know that we're going through trying to figure out the search firm and whatnot now. Kind of tailors to your saying of, you know, they may know somebody, you know, and recruit them. And I think now may be the time to publicly say this. I've been personally reached out to by a former manager in North Carolina who also is currently doing some consulting in interim. This individual was also when our former county manager, Paula Stewart, was hired, he was the runner-up in that decision. And he has expressed great interest in wanting to apply. So I don't know if, is it possible to interview him prior to any of this? I mean, I'd hate to waste, you know, money. I mean, I know that we would need to probably open it up to the public or whatnot in order to apply, but at least for maybe a follow-on interim period, or if he is, you know, meets the qualifications and the rest of the board, I personally think this individual is spot on. So how exactly would you?
My recommendation to you would be, I think you need to go through a detailed search. I don't know the individual you're talking about, and they may end up being the person you choose. But I think at this point where you are, my personal opinion is you need to go out and see what's out there and try to bring someone in with a great deal of experience. This is not a beginner job. This is a job you get towards the end of your career. It's a big county. And so we should have a lot of interest in it. And you're in the Charlotte. I'll leave it Charlotte. It's in the Raleigh metro area, it's growing. I think you have a tremendous number of positives, so I'm gonna be surprised if you don't have a very good applicant pool. And then let's see how this person stacks up against all of that. And that would be my recommendation. The fees they're charging, we're talking about probably 25, county expenses that are $25,000 to $28,000. That's a small price to pay to go through this process.
Agreed.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner McCoy?
my personal thoughts on that, I don't think that any commissioner should be reaching out to hire a county manager here. I think we should go through the search team, and that's the proper way for us to do. We have certain rules and certain guidelines, and we should stay within the perimeters of those guidelines. So I agree with, we should go through the proper procedure, hire people that are qualified to run this county. And it's gonna be a huge job with the growth that we have here and the economic development growth that we're trying to build here. So that's my suggestion. I don't think no commissioner should do that, should be involved in it.
Here, I'd like to clarify something. I didn't know this individual until they had reached out to me expressing their interest. So,
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You have rules and guidelines.
and that's why I was asking the proper procedures and how to handle that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from any commissioners?
Yeah, so we'll have it on the agenda for Monday then.
Sounds good.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I have one item to add. We
Yep.
just got this in July 21, and of course I was out during that time. What Melissa is handing out is every year, about this time of the year, the tax administrator is required under state law to do what's called a settlement with the board. You charge the tax collector with collecting the taxes every July or August. In fact, on your next draft agenda, you have on there to charge him with tax collections for the coming year. Okay. Before you can do that, you need to settle. And so what this is, and I just want to give it to you today, I'd like to add this to the agenda for August, but I would like to go through it a little bit with you. So if you look at about the 4th page, this is a good synopsis. Okay. Is everybody there where it says 2020 annual settlement overview? Yeah. You'll note total charges for 2020 tax levy. The original billed amount, $60,891,000 and some change. Discovered levy, additional levy. What that is sometimes we find property that hasn't been listed for taxes, and that's called a discovery. Okay. And then you put an additional levy on that. So those are additions to the bills he sends out. Then you have some penalties, interest, and fees. Some people don't list their property or whatever, and they get a late listing penalty for doing that. So that goes on, and he's got to collect that. So the total charges that he was supposed to collect is $61,920,750.70. The total collections for the 2020 tax levy, total amount collected is $61,152,650. The leases are adjusted. Now, that is the opposite of the discovery. If we make an error and we bill you incorrect on your property, whether it's a road or your house or whatever, those adjustments fall in that category. So then we have the principal amount of uncollected 2020 taxes constituting liens on real property.
That's $312,030.42. Then the principal amount of uncollected 2020 taxes for personal property is $85,430.65. The reason they break that out is you have a tax lien against real property. The personal property is harder to collect because you don't have a lien against it. That's like an option. So basically, what you have left uncollected is $312,030 and $85,403. If you go to the next page, this breaks it down further. You have total billed, this is real property. You see that we only have $393,686 uncollected. That is a 99.34% collection rate. That's not good, that's outstanding. So our property tax collection department is doing an outstanding job. Public service, that is your utilities and railroad property. The state comes in and does the assessment on that. We don't do the appraisals on that. And the reason for that is they have to split it among 100 counties. You know, the railroads are going through 10 counties. They have to split that. You typically get 100% of that, and you did. Motor vehicles, we're at 91.81%. Remember that on motor vehicles, since about 4 or 5 years ago, that is now actually collected by the state. You pay that at the DMV when you register your vehicle. When they switched to that, it improved dramatically. Because the problem for us is, a lot of times we wouldn't get vehicle taxes because somebody would have moved away. This way, you can't drive your car and get your registration for your vehicle tags without paying the taxes. So that has improved dramatically. Okay. And then we have gap bills on motor vehicles, and it's a small amount, and that's pretty much the leftover bills on the vehicles. So that's a good breakdown of it. The next page, when you aggregate all of that, your collection percentage is 98.75%. That is outstanding. What that also means is that when we go to do your budget every year, by state law, we cannot use, we're going to estimate what your property taxes are going to be. Because we take the current year, we estimate what the growth is, and we look at things like building permits and stuff like that. When we do that, then you have to apply, all right, what are you actually going to get? You cannot use a higher percentage than what you collected the year before. So we're able to apply 98.75. Typically, we back that off a little bit just to give a cushion. But the bottom line is, if you had a sorry tax collection process, it hurts you at budget time, and it causes you to have to raise taxes in order to generate the same amount of revenue. So I can't stress enough, this is the biggest cash register you have is your property tax. And they're doing an outstanding job. So with that, all we need on the agenda, Mr. Chairman, is a simple motion to accept the settlement with the tax administrator. And then following that, you already have it on the draft agenda, which we're going to go over. We will immediately have that to where you then charge him with the taxes for this year. And that will take care of everything we need to do on the tax collections for this year. Anybody have any questions?
And that is already on the draft agenda for next week, included in the consent agenda.
It is for charging him. This part was not, but we will have it on there.
Okay, so we're going to add this on the consent agenda as well. Any objections to that, any commissioner? Okay, that's good. We're still with your report, Mr. Wood.
Okay, the August 2, 2021 meeting, I believe Melissa has given you a draft of that.
to short circuit this, we've already made notes on the work session agenda, what you wanted back on the agenda, so we'll add all that. What we have additionally is tax rebates and releases. And we do that every month as some come in, you know, where they release people or they have rebates on that. Budget amendments. Health Department has been allocated $1,089,000 in communicable disease funds from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And so we'll need to accept those. And that's just additional money for our health department. They've also received another $259,000 on the COVID vaccination program funds, and we want to receive those as well. And then F is what we just talked about, and that is where you will adopt an order directing the tax administrator to collect the taxes charged for the 21 and 22 tax year. And the rest of it is just items we've added from the work session today. So that's what we have for the agenda, unless somebody has something to add to it.
And those items that we decide to take more time on or pull off for next week, y'all will do that?
Yes.
You've got notes of that? Yes,
Yeah,
sounds good.
What I have is that you wanted me to take off the NTIA broadband infrastructure grant program. We don't need approval. You said to go forward and do the grant.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think what we took off was the rental policy, wasn't it?
Right, and the rental property, I think, we're going to have a little more time on that. And I believe, depending upon, item 8 there, Mr. Appel may or may not be ready, or we may delay that, the easement. Yeah, that could be, okay.
So that's what we had.
Okay. And we were going to put item 7, I believe, on the consent agenda, is that correct?
What is that?
Item 7 was the approval of bylaws for the appeals board for the stop arm.
That'll be on there. He's ready to go with that.
Right. And then, I guess, whether or not we have any update on the ARP would determine whether 11 stays. I think we had.
Yeah, well, I think the only thing he did there is, we wanted your concurrence that we go ahead and draw the money back.
Okay, sounds good.
Now, did we agree that you need to vote on that, or do you want us to just go ahead with that?
I think there will be a resolution that they do need to vote.
It is a resolution. We'll have a resolution.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, and we can include that on the consent agenda as well, I'm assuming, resolution.
Yeah, go ahead.
I neglected to mention something that was going to be part of the facilities space discussion that we do want to bring before you at the moment. I did mention staffing is an issue. The current commons policy does require that a facility staff member be on site for those events that happen after hours. Our facilities department currently has $26,318 budgeted for part-time salaries. This covers one part-time employee who manages the courthouse. Their full job is managing the courthouse, just like we have somebody that manages the jail specifically. And it also has funding intended to cover part-time staffing for the commons area, since that policy again requires staff to be in attendance. The employee at the courthouse recently retired. He was a very good employee that took a lot of pride in that space. We've had some issues recently recruiting for part-time positions. Our facilities manager is concerned that he may not be able to find somebody on a part-time basis that will keep it up to the same standard. Additionally, we tried to hire, I think it was several years ago now, for the position to work the commons events, and we had a very difficult time getting anybody in place to do that. So the request from the facilities department is to potentially combine those two part-time positions into a single full-time position, which would allow them to recruit somebody that could manage the courthouse, but also using their, on a rotational basis, allow staff to adequately engage the commons area per policy now that we are using that facility again. Facilities, again, had $26,318 budgeted in part-time salaries for the current year. The total cost of a full-time position would be $52,625.17. That is with all the benefits that are included with that position. So it would be a cost increase from what was budgeted. Of that increase, only just over $6,000 would be actual salaries. The rest is benefits. The request from the board is, what is your willingness to add a full-time position to replace those two part-time positions, to allow facilities to manage that process. Otherwise, they would move forward in trying to recruit a new part-time position for the courthouse as it currently sits.
We wanted to go over that with you this morning, so you could be thinking about it. My suggestion would be, since we're going to come back to you and have a more detailed discussion on the policies of the commons and this building, this decision, in my mind, ought to be made in conjunction with that, because it's going to depend on what you do there and how much you open it up and how much additional staffing we need. So that would be my recommendation, but we wanted to make you aware that that's what they want to look at. But I would tie that in with your discussion on the policy.
I think the issue that we do face is the employee who managed the courthouse is no longer here. So our facilities department needs to know kind of which way they're going to be able to fill that.
But they can make do for 3 weeks.
Okay. Okay.
We need to make sure where we're going with this.
Mr. Chairman, I go along with Mr. Wood's recommendation.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, Mr. McCoy, yep, okay, so we're good with that. We'll include that in that discussion 3 weeks. If they could get somebody to help with the courthouse for that time, then we'll have a little bit more information to be able to know where to go, I think. Thank you, Mr. Tain. Okay, so did we finish with the draft agenda?
I think so.
Okay, very good. All right, so then I guess next, Mr. Wood, would be applications to serve on boards and committees.
We have a list here. I don't know
Okay.
how much y'all want me to go through that. I haven't really been involved in this one, to be honest with you. Okay.
Yeah, I think Mr. Rouse has recommended a couple of people here.
Yes, there is only, looks like one appointment on here. Harnett County Health Director John Rouse would like to recommend that Linda Sturdivant be reappointed to the board. And currently she serves as the public member of the board, and it would be her third term.
Okay. And then I believe Ms. Allen as well.
Yes, and he would also like to recommend that Amy Allen be reappointed to the board. She serves as the regional nurse and vice chairperson of the board, and this would be her third term as well. And then there's one additional vacancy for a position on this board.
Okay. Very good. Any discussion or questions on that? Thank you, Ms. Tain. And then I think we all have a copy of the upcoming meetings listed there.
Mr. Chairman, we do have one other thing.
Okay.
I mention to you. We want to talk about the bonus checks that you did. So Brian's going to give you an update.
Thank you.
Yes, I promise this is the last thing I will
That's
bring
all
to you
right.
today. So the board, as you know, at your June 21st meeting, approved the one-time bonus for county and Harnett County Schools classified employees. And at the time, the goal was to include that with the July paycheck if possible. We have been working on that, and we were prepared last Friday to move forward with that until our finance alerted me they had discovered an issue with what we were trying to do. So the goal was to give the bonus this Thursday as its own check, so the employees would see what that is, and then to give the normal paycheck on Friday. However, we discovered that there's a glitch in our software related to 401ks. If an employee, let's say they contribute $600 to their 401k, not only would that be reduced from their paycheck, as is normally done, it would also be reduced from the $1,000 bonus. We have a significant amount of employees who have a situation like that, so we thought that the board's intent was to make sure employees, receive the highest benefit possible from the bonus. So we talked through our options, and the way forward would be to include it as part of the August paycheck. We wanted to bring that to your attention since we needed to update you on what will happen. My intent, if the board is comfortable with that, would be to send out an email to county employees. We wanted to wait until we knew when the check would come out before we communicated that to them.
And originally, the reason we were doing two separate checks was when you combine the bonus with the regular, it can affect them on the taxes, and more money gets taken out.
Right.
So we're actually trying to save the employee money, and then this computer glitch backfires with 401k. So we just wanted to make you aware that it will be out in August.
I understand.
Sorry for the delay.
And once you prepare that correspondence for staff, I know it's kind of like pay me now, pay me later. If they pay that, they take that as additional taxes out now. Hopefully they get them back when they file. So that hopefully will not create such a anyway. Make it look like much less than they were hoping for, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, thank you.
And we will communicate that to our employees, assuming the board's
Very
comfortable
good.
with that.
And I appreciate your hard work on that, because I know that is some of the way we decided to try to administer that's created some challenges, but I appreciate the hard work you've done working through that.
So we appreciate y'all doing that. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments or questions for Mr. Haney?
I appreciate that. This is Commissioner McCoy. I appreciate that you're gonna send out the email, because they are asking about that money.
Yes, so we've gotten questions from school employees as well.
I'm
and,
sure.
We've got all the information from the school system and are moving forward with that as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Haney. Okay. I believe we have need to go into closed session. No?
Mr. Chairman, I have
Yes.
something I
Yes,
want
Mr.
to
McCoy.
present to the board. I just received a letter from employees of this county asking that you reconsider your decision on diverse training in this county. I got a letter here on the signed by 5 different employees of this county, and they're asking for this training simply because the county is planning to have a comprehensive growth plan, and they're going to plan a part in this comprehensive growth plan. So they are asking that we consider the diversity training, because the employees of this county feel that it's a serious need for it. So I'm just putting it out there for this board to reconsider. You first adopted, and then you changed your mind simply because of House Bill 324 has nothing to do with diverse training for the employees here, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm just giving you what the employees of this county is asking for. So that's the decision that all the commissioners will have to reconsider, or if you do reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCoy. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so since I understand we don't have need for a closed session, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Thank you, Commissioner Witherspoon. Thank you, Commissioner Nickel. All in favor, say aye. Aye. It is adjourned.